Välkommen allesammen. I meant to do this video a while back. When you see people doing these circular motions in religious or spiritual or magic practices, you see me doing this when I do my blots, or other people doing it like witches or certain people doing their magical or spiritual practices, all kinds of different folk traditions, just walking around the tree like we do at Christmas time or in the midsummer in Scandinavia. You probably do this too in some point in your life. It all comes back to a very ancient practice of circular movements for some sort of spiritual practice. Are we doing it because we humans just like to get dizzy? No, there is a very important reason that we do this and uses for this, even though that meaning has been lost over thousands of years, and I'm going to tell you why exactly in a minute. But first I'm going to speak about what the Norse sources say about examples of this, and this will give you an idea of how you can incorporate this into your daily practices if you feel like it. So as far as the Norse sources go, telling stories about actual pagans during Viking times, there are only two examples that I'm aware of. One comes in Grettirs Saga, and in here the witch carves runes on a tree stump to place a curse on Grettir, and she was said to walk backwards counterclockwise to complete the spell. Another example comes in Heimskringla, when King Aldis was there at the Great Blot sacrifice in Uppsala, and he was riding around the temple on his horse. And this seems like riding around in circles was sort of an opening to the ceremony, which is why in my blots, as you have seen, I always walk in circles too. So these are about the only examples we have of this in the Viking sagas, but we have much more coming from later on in time in the Scandinavian folk tradition. If we look at sources like some of the grimoires, magic books, all found all over Scandinavia, called Svarteböcker, we have found many hundreds of examples of these circular motions. A lot of these old recipes that we find for witches' salves, it mentions to stir the salve 3 times counterclockwise. Another one could be a healing spell where you light some sulfur on fire and you walk around that sick person and bring it around 3 times counterclockwise. Another one that I can think of, probably this one is very ancient. If someone has lost their courage, you give them a drink of alcohol that you have stirred counterclockwise 9 times with a knife while reciting a chant. We also have more kind of regular ones, like to make someone fall in love with you, you can take 9 drops of water from a place where the water forms a whirlpool and then wash the person with those 9 drops somehow. So there are hundreds and hundreds of examples like this. I can go on. These are not Christian spells, guys. A lot of these so-called scholars don't want to admit that these are pagan, because some of these are recorded in books as late as the 1800s, actually. People were still doing these practices. And don't even get me started. I can talk for 5 days about how much of this magic we find in Scandinavian folk tradition and being pagan original. If these scholars actually looked at pagan magic from around the world and spirituality, instead of just reading the sagas and eddas while they sniff their own asses, they would see that a lot of this magic is no different than any other magic that humans have practiced all over for many thousands of years. Anyway, so we know that walking and turning and doing lots of things in counterclockwise motion is super important for some of these spiritual practices all over the world that we hear about similar things. Very interesting. The question is why? Why was this done? The Norse sources don't provide an answer for this, no written ones anyway, but if you talk to actual traditional practitioners, they will tell you a few things. And I'm aware of a couple reasons that this was done all around the world, but it all comes back to the same kind of primary meaning. Around the world, there is something that is referred to as sympathetic magic or imitative magic, and what that is when a certain act or ritual is done to imitate the desired effect of something else in the same kind of general vicinity, like doing something over here in this room so that that same kind of energy gets spread and makes it easier to happen in the next room. For example, certain tribes around the world have a ritual to aid with childbirth, where the midwife would go outside of the tent where a woman is giving birth, and the midwife would kind of strap a stone around her midsection, and slowly she would start to maneuver that stone out below, imitating the childbirth. And the belief was that this same kind of act happening in the near area will spread that energy and help the woman push the baby out easier. Another example comes from certain tribes in Africa where the men would go to battle, the women would be standing some distance away from the battlefield and putting melons and other large fruit on sticks. And the women would be taking their swords out and chopping these fruits in half, imitating the battle in hopes that their men would chop the heads off of enemies and have the victory. Another example of imitative magic that you all know is voodoo dolls, of course, and all these beliefs are all very animistic. All over the world we had similar views. Okay, so walking in circles or circular motions is an example of this too. Whenever people want to keep the energy here instead of it just passing through, they would incorporate some sort of circular movement with the belief that this energy or the universe or the spirits or the vibes or whatever you want to call it, instead of passing through the area like it normally does, when you start to imitate this circular motion, the energy too will get caught into this circular motion. Kind of like compare like wind passing through versus a tornado being drawn in and staying here. Now sometimes this type of thing is very good because it's energy that you want to bring to the area and keep there, like I spoke about in the various rituals involving circular motions. But sometimes it's not a good thing and you don't want this to happen. For example, in ancient Rome it was a law that you were not allowed to bring a spindle whorl into any cornfields, because it was believed that this might encourage the crops to imitate the spindle and weave around each other, destroying the crops. Same thing in other cultures around the world. If this was a negotiation or peace talk, you were not allowed to have a spindle whorl in the area or do any kind of circular motions, because it was believed to make the conversation go in circles and they would argue endlessly with no solutions. These were actually laws and kings in very ancient times that believed these things. So this is one explanation. When you want to have the energy stay in the area for a blut or a ritual or a type of magic or anything. If you're just walking around the Christmas tree like we do in Scandinavia and you want to have this nice energy stay around here instead of just passing through, we can incorporate some kind of circular motion. This is what was done in the Norse tradition and in other places around the world. In the Norse tradition, it's always counterclockwise, and 3 times is usually enough, but we have some sources saying that 9 times should be done. The main explanation, you can read about this in a book called The Golden Bough. Believe it if you want, you don't have to. It sounds crazy, but it's all of our ancestors, no matter where you come from in the world, believed something similar to this. It all comes back to the idea of animism, the belief system that we have all shared if we go back far enough in time. The idea that everything around us has some sort of spiritual energy and that we don't quite understand in the modern day, but some of the traditions and habits even that you practice today have some type of origin in this sympathetic magic that I just spoke about. So that's all I say for today. There are probably other explanations as to why people do these circular motions. Feel free to leave any comments if you have any ideas. That's why I make these videos, so we can all compare ideas and share knowledge together. So that's all for today. Vi ses nästa gång.